Raised primarily in Philadelphia, she finished her secondary education on a full scholarship at Springside, an all-female private boarding school in Philadelphia. She graduated from Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, and Temple University School of Law. During law school, an exchange program took her to the University of Ghana Law School in Legon. Is that how you pronounce it?
Legon.
Legon, Ghana, West Africa. Pamela still practices law and has enjoyed an over 30-year career as an insurance adjuster in Pennsylvania and Florida. She's here today to tell us about the history of quilting, present some of her wonderful work, which I'm sure you've already looked at, but give us some more details, and give us a story of how she was inspired to take up the art of quilting. So, Pamela, it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me here, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to give honor to my angels, my ancestors, those that came before me. I'm just going to raise this up just a little bit. All right, can you hear me?
Just make sure the volume's on. Up and
Okay. There we go. So you can hear me now. Thank you. Okay, so in preparing my remarks, because of my background, research is kind of sort of what I do, okay? So as a mediator and arbitrator, I find that when I meet with people, I try, if at all possible, are there things that we can agree upon before we move forward? Because if we can't agree on anything, we definitely have a problem. So also what I do is I like to start with definitions. So I'm going to start with some definitions. So quilting is defined as a craft or leisure activity, work produced by quilting, pattern of stitching, used for quilting. The definition of a quilt: join together layers of fabric or padding with lines of stitching to form warm bed coverings, garments, or for decorative effect. The word quilt comes from the Latin Culcita, which means mattress or cushion. The Old French pronunciation is quit, and the New French also is quit. So what I found interesting, but not really that interesting or surprising, and I don't know if you knew this or not, how many of you knew that quilting has African roots? African roots. That's what I thought. Oh, you knew.
We went to the African American Museum when they had quilts, and I think I heard that comment.
Okay.
It made room in that brain somewhere.
Okay, so I'm going to expand on that just for a little bit. Okay, so in doing the research, I came across this article, and I'm going to quote some of it verbatim. And so it was in the New York Times. It was an article by Ann Berry, and it was on November 16, 1989. The name of the article was "Quilting Has African Roots, a New Exhibit." So there was an exhibit at the Craft Museum entitled "Who'd a Thought It? Improvisation in African American Quilting." So there were 27 quilts from the personal collection of Eli Leon. And so I quote, "Mr. Leon has found that much of the American patchwork quilt tradition may be derived from African design. Patchwork was originally done in Africa. The African slaves who came both to England and to the United States routinely decorated items. The patchwork quilt emerged simultaneously in England and the United States, in households of the aristocracy at a period of time when there were African slaves in those households. Since scraps of cloth were becoming more and more available after 1750 with the process of industrialization, it seems likely to me that the English and Americans got the idea of using them decoratively from their slaves. He further speculates that some patterns that were to become standard in American patchwork quilts originated in African textiles and carried over into African American quilts. So, I bought some of the resources that I use, and I just wanted to share because someone had asked me prior to the meeting how I got started quilting. And so I guess I can say when I was very young, I learned to sew. My mother taught me how to sew. When my mother would sew, I would be there gathering the scraps and I would make outfits for my Barbie dolls, okay? And so from there, I grew up and was educated both in the public school system and for 2 years, I got a full tuition scholarship to attend an all-female private school. But I was educated during a time when they actually taught home economics. Oh my goodness. Okay, so how many of you, your first project, was it an apron? Okay, so you all know what an apron is. I mean, if you were to ask someone today what an apron is, they would look at you like, what are you talking about? Although they are coming back. I mean, everything is like full circle, right? And so then, when I went to college, I took my sewing machine. I would always create outfits. So I've always sewed. I guess the other part of growing up when I grew up in an educational system that valued art and music. I can't tell you how important it is to be exposed to art and music and literature. But anywho, so all of that kind of was like a backdrop. And so I didn't do anything artsy for years. I mean, I never considered myself to be an artist. I mean, creative, yeah, but whatever. And so then a number of years ago, I met Lauren Austin, and Lauren has spoken here, and in fact, Lauren was the featured artist of the Fall Deland Art Festival. And one of her quilts was the featured art. And then, of course, earlier last year, there was an exhibit at the African American Museum in Deland of some of the quilters, and 2 of my quilts was in that. So it was at that point, well, actually, let me back up. At the Zora Neale Hurston Festival, that's where I first became aware of Lauren Austin. And that was when she was the artist in residence in New Smyrna Beach. Okay. And just the other day, because, I'm also a photographer, I found photos that I had taken from those earlier Zora Neale Hurston festivals where there was a time when anyone and everyone who was part of, African American art, history, luminaries like Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee and, just world-renowned poets and artists would come to Eatonville. And I'm glad that I was able to actually drink in some of that knowledge. So fast forward a couple of years, I started doing batik at a senior center in Orlando with a friend of mine. Her name is Shalini Tandon, and she still teaches batik, but she also teaches acrylic painting, watercolor. Basically women, we just come and hang out. Sometimes we don't create anything, except for we just sit there and just hang out, okay? Because, we always bring food, okay? Because, come on, when women gather, we gotta eat, come on. Thinking and being creative is hard work. So I took batik with Shalini, and then a few years after that, I had an opportunity to travel with her to India, which was an incredible experience. So essentially, some of what I brought here is going to incorporate a lot of different stuff. So like any artist or any of us in this room, we are all a product of how we were socialized, where you lived, where you grew up. And so Petra mentioned that my father was in the military, so I call myself a citizen of the world. I'm very fortunate that I've been able to travel. I've lived abroad. It makes a difference. It really does. So it does. And I appreciate, the opportunity to come and to speak to you ladies, and hopefully you have an open heart and open mind, and you'll learn something from this experience, that even though we are different, we are alike in more ways than you can think of. And if you just take a few moments and engage someone in conversation, you will sooner or later find something you have in common with that person, okay? So, Mr. Leon further said that he believes, let me just see here. He says that the flexible patterns of African Americans might have been the models for standard patterns. And so when you think of quilting, and Lauren Austin is a good example of this, because she learned what we like to call traditional quilting with traditional patterns, like you may be familiar with, like the log cabin, wedding rings. And it's interesting because all groups have quilting. I grew up in Philadelphia, and right outside of Philadelphia, we had the Amish. And if you've ever been to like Lancaster, Pennsylvania, or Reading, you know that the quilts that they create are magnificent, but they're what I would consider to be more traditional patterns. And if you look at my quilts, hopefully are the colors like causing you to whip out your sunglasses? Because, I just love color, and the work that I do reflects me, my personality, and color. So he says that in all probability, African Americans would have improvised as they had in Africa. They might easily have generated many of the prototypes for the patterns that were to become popular in the standard tradition. So just to digress for a moment, I don't know if you all are familiar with the women's of Gee's Bend.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I've got that video if anybody ever wants to watch.
The incredible. So what is interesting is in I guess the 19th century, they were quote, discovered because it was recognized that the quilts that they had created were different. It was like folk art, and the patterns that they used were unique. And so, as she said, that's an incredible video. They have a book, they've had exhibits.
What was that? Could you repeat that?
Gees Bend. It's a group of women in Gees Bend, Alabama.
Oh, thank you.
And you can Google it.
Yeah.
And you have the video?
I have the video to that. There was a program that was down at the Orlando Museum a few years ago.
Yes, and I went to that, yes.
Yeah, and they had all the quilts there, and I bought the CD, and I'd show it to the kids when I was teaching, and I've got a set of cards and the postcards that go with it. It's phenomenal.
It is absolutely.
Yeah.
And throughout the years at the Zora Festival, I met incredible artists, and a lot of my friends are artists. There's one that comes to mind, Mary Missionary Proctor. And she would literally take doors and create phenomenal pieces of art off of doors. And so what is interesting about African American art, in my opinion, is, and even in my travels, like when I've gone to South Africa and other places, that we have the capability to create beautiful art out of things that people would, for the most part, deem trash. Like they take telephone wire and create magnificent animals and things of that sort. And so hopefully this, I'm not just gonna stand here, talk. This is gonna be interactive. So anytime you have a question, just ask a question, or you wanna say something, just say something, okay? Okay.
We actually have some of the wire art for sale down at
Okay.
the museum store.
Is it from South Africa?
I think it might be.
Okay.
Because I bought one of the small baskets. I use it all the time.
Cool.
For chocolates for my husband.
Cool. So, Eli Leon, that's a name you might want to write down, Elileon. Apparently, he died when he was 82, and he was called the champion of African American quilt makers. So I found another article when I was doing research, and so he died on March the 6th, 2018 in California, which is where he lived at that time. So at the time of his death, he had approximately 3,000 African American quilts that he had collected throughout his lifetime. Can you even imagine? So I give you the name because you can actually go, you can Google his name, you can Google his collection, and you can actually see photos. But after he died, he donated his entire collection to, and I just have to look at it, it's called BAMPFA, B-A-M-P-F-A, and that stands for University California Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archive. So you can go to their website as well, and you can look at all of the quilts that he collected throughout his lifetime. So earlier last year, like February 19th, there was supposed to be an exhibit of some of the quilts, but we know with COVID, I don't know that the exhibit actually happened, but I think it did, because when I went to the website, you can see all of these links. So I think you can go and you can actually get like a virtual tour. So if you wanted to do that, you could do that. Okay, and you can find that at BAMPFA.org. Okay, so to further lead credence to the theory that there are African American roots in quilting, in about 3400 BC, there's a carved ivory figure in the British Museum of an Egyptian pharaoh wearing what looks like a quilted mantle, okay? And so that led me kind of sort of down a rabbit hole. And I found a website, and it's called zubeum.org. And it's also entitled an article, The History of Quilting. So it's the story of Bob and Eileen Zubeum, where they talk about travel as creative fuel for their art. And that really struck a chord in me because, yes, I love to travel. And whenever I travel, I do research. I keep a travel journal. And my nieces and nephews have benefited because whenever they have gotten a degree, I always ask them, if you could go anywhere in the world, where would you like to go? And if they don't tell me, then I'm like, you get to go where Aunt Pam and Grandma want to go, okay? So a lot of the trips have been planned around places that I know have a rich textile history. So I always buy cloth, always do research, always know where the stores are. And when my mom and nieces and whoever, they're like, oh, we don't want to do anything. I was like, see you later. I'm going to find my fabric store. Okay. And that's what I do. So I bring back fabric from a lot of places because fabric tells a story as well, okay? And so then there was one other website that I found, and it is Nugget, N-U-G-G-E-T, news.com, and it's entitled an article, Quilting Has a Long and Vibrant International History. So essentially the premise of this article was that quilting is international, which it is. And it goes on to state that people tell stories through their quilts, which is true. They also said that quilts reflect religious and philosophical beliefs. And that they're worn as adornment, they're used for warmth. I mean, there are all kinds of reasons why people wear quilts. I mean, my ancestors created quilts for warmth, and you see a pillow sham, which is part of a king-size quilt that my great aunt, that when she died, she was either 99 or 100 years old, depending on which one of the two birthdays. We believe that, you know, for Social Security purposes she had. And so when she gave it to me in 1990, I started crying. And she thought I was crying because I didn't like it. But I was crying because I realized that it was truly a labor of love. I mean, think about, and it's all hand done. It's all hand stitched. I mean, think about how many hours she spent with her scraps of fabric, cutting out the little circles, and then you have to draw them up, and then you just collect them. And think about, I mean, she made me a king-size quilt and 2 pillow shams. You know, my mother, so this would have been her aunt, my mother has quilts, and my mother's 87. My mother has quilts that were made by her grandmother. So I can't even, like, in terms of trying to figure out how old they must be, I figured they're over 100 years old, but I mean, it leaves me speechless. So, you know, we have the hand quilting like that, and then the piece right there, the lion, is an example of like applique or patchwork, and I bought that when I was in Ghana. And so in a lot of cultures, when they quilt, they do more applique. Now, this is not a quilt, this is a wall hanging, but still the principle is the same. And so then, I just want to give you one more site, and then we'll talk about some of the other pieces. So there's another website called quiltofbelonging.ca. And so this is an article about quilting in Egypt, which, believe it or not, is customarily done by men. That's what I said. And that's because they create these intricate patterns on tents. And in Cairo, and Egypt is on my list of places to go. And I don't know if it still exists or not, but there's a tent maker's bazaar that exists in Cairo. And if I get there, I'm gonna check it out and I'll give you all a progress report when I come back, okay? So the actual quilt of belonging is 120 feet. Can you imagine? And it was like a collaborative textile project of the human family, and it consists of 263 blocks. And each of these blocks portrays the cultural legacy of the first people in Canada and throughout the world, which I thought that was kind of cool, kind of neat. Okay, so now I'm just going to, the first quilt that I made, which is this one right here, I call it Ancestral Journey. And you might not be able to see, okay. You'll see that, and it's kind of faded. Do you see the sign where it has 80 and Bussy Road? Right here. Believe it or not, if you go to Atlanta on Interstate 75, there is actually an exit 80, which is Bussy Road.
Is that your road?
I'm gonna tell you the story. So, also on that same quilt, I believe there's a picture of a water tower that says Cuthbert, Cuthbert. And on my father's side and on my mother's side, I'm very fortunate that I know that's where my family, that's where our roots are in the red clay of Georgia. And I'm the first born in my family. I'm the first of 3 children. When my mother was pregnant and about ready to have me, she was in Detroit with my father. But her people said to her, you're not gonna have that baby up north with them heathens. You need to come on home and have that baby, okay? So I'm the only one that was born in Cuthbert, Georgia. And by that time, they also had acquired in Cuthbert, Georgia, a hospital. So I was actually born in a hospital, okay? Meanwhile, you know, my mother and other people in my family, they were born, you know, midwives. And so growing up, because my father was in the military, we never really went to Cuthbert. But when I moved to Florida in the late 90s, I've been to Cuthbert more times than I can tell you because I still have family on my mother's side and on my father's side. And when I went to Ghana, the summer of 1981, when I got there, the thing that struck me that really, in a visceral manner, was that they had red clay, similar to the red clay in Cuthbert, Georgia. And it was like, for me, like I was home, okay? So getting back to the story about Bussy Road. In 2017, I had the honor of serving on the Orlando Sentinel Advisory Opinion Board, where for the entire year I got to express myself. If you remember 2017, there was a lot going on, so I had a lot to express myself about, okay? So you can find any of those articles if you Google my name in Orlando Sentinel. And one of the articles that I wrote, it was a thing called What Southern Monuments Mean to Me. And I spoke about Bussy Road. And I had done a little bit of research, and so I knew that these were people that were connected to me. These were people who probably had owned my people. And when I first moved to Lake Mary, I remember I went through the phone book. Remember when we had phone books, y'all? And there was an attorney in Orlando with the same last name. Now, my last name is not a common last name. So I knew he also was probably someone who was connected to me. So I decided I was gonna get dressed up and I was gonna go to his office with one of my cards that said Pamela P. Bussy, attorney at law. And so I went there and I gave it to the receptionist, and she probably was like, WTH. And so I didn't necessarily think that he would come out and speak to me, and he did not. But I thought it was kind of like a full circle moment. So you never know. You never know. Okay, so if we want to now very quickly, the last quilt, which is one of the quilts that I had in the on exhibit at the African American Museum in Deland, and I just got to go to my seat real quick.
It's really interesting because it's two sides. Oh, it's got two sides.
Okay. So, remember when I said that, you know, my quilts, they kind of tell a story. So the back of that quilt, when I saw it, it reminded me like of a black angel. And so a lot of times my quilts, you know, you can either side them. It's all good. And so as she walks around, I'm just going to share with you what some of the symbols mean. And the reason I bought this is it's so funny. She mentioned that one of your guild members is in Hawaii. And who doesn't love Hawaii? Come on. And so what you can't really tell, the piece that's in the middle is an angel. And it's a Hawaiian quilt template. And if you've ever been to Hawaii, you know that Hawaiian quilts are like applique. And so I really like the fabric. She'll flip it around, okay? And you'll see like the fabric, which is kind of like a purplish color. And I tried with gold thread to outline the wings of the angel because I just had to have that fabric. But anywho, so this is actually the template that I used. And maybe you can see it better here than you can on the fabric that I chose. And so the templates is bizarre because you have to lay them so that when you cut it, it's one piece. And it took me a minute to figure this out, how to get it so it was like one piece. But the ones that didn't become one piece, I saved them because you know what? You never know. So I save everything and I can incorporate it. So even with a lot of my quilts, a lot of projects that turned out not quite the way I wanted them to turn out, but still, I use it. So as you see, you can see like the angel wings, okay? So I'll just very quickly go through some of the other symbolism. So the angel, or Anila, the Hawaiians believe that we live in two worlds, the spiritual and the physical. The angels are just part of our spiritual world, providing us with guidance in our everyday life. So the name of this piece, I call it Metamorphosis. I created it earlier this year. Myself and three sister girlfriends of mine, we all went to college together. We were in Georgia, Tybee Island. If you've ever been to Savannah, who doesn't love Savannah Scad? How many of you been to Tybee Island? Okay, so do you know about the history of Tybee Island? Probably not, but I'm gonna share very quickly that Tybee Island, like so many places, used to be somewhere where Black people could not go. Imagine that, okay? But anywho, so I created this. We were staying like feet, literally, we could be out on the patio when the beach was right there, and all of this came to me. So kind of sort of how I create is either I will first come up, kind of backward, with the name of a piece, and then I create the piece. Is that kind of strange? Usually it's the other way. You create the piece, you look and say, I'm gonna come. But that was like, no, I'm gonna create a piece and I'm gonna call it Metamorphosis, okay? And that's what it became. So the butterfly, of course, is a symbol of metamorphosis. And if you look, you will see butterflies, and I actually found a fabric which has butterflies and it's like glittery, okay? We'll get to the feathers, because feathers find me. Also, you have the continent of Africa in different colors, red, black, and green, and those colors are, they do mean something. And so the feathers, since you mentioned the feathers. Okay, so feathers literally find me. I've been in 2019, the last international trip I took, I was in Paris with my friend Sophie, who's French, and we were at Versailles. And I was standing like in the center, and literally I looked up, and like a white feather just came and landed at my feet. And I was like, okay, there you go. So they're like gifts. I view them as gifts. So while I was creating this quilt, those feathers that you see, they found me. And I incorporated them into the quilt. So, feathers, for those of you who don't know, are a sign that a divine presence is watching over you, and they can symbolize angels or the souls of loved ones. And so the pink feather, pink represents unconditional love. Orange, energy, change, success, creativity. Brown is stability, grounding. Blue is peace and inspiration. And black is protecting your energy for your spiritual awakening. There are all kind of other symbols that are on there that if you look, you can see, and you can come up and we can have more discussion. So there's the raised fist in the middle. And so what that means is, it's a little saying that goes with it. When I raise my fist, it's not to say we are better than another race of people. I raise my fist to uplift my brothers and sisters who have been degraded for hundreds of years. So then there are charms that are on that particular quilt. There's like an eye of Horus, which is an Egyptian symbol. You've probably seen it. If not, I can point it out to you. There's a Ganesh, which is a remover of obstacle. That's for those who are Hindu. And because I have Indian friends, of course, they know I love Ganesh. So they always give me with Ganeshes or Lakshmis. There's a hand of Hamsa or hand of Fatima, which is an Islamic symbol. And so the 5 fingers represent the 5 pillars of Islam, a symbol for protection as a defense to ward off the evil eye. You know the Greek evil eye. Everybody has seen the Greek evil eye, okay? So 5 fingers in Judaism represent the 5 books of the Torah: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And the 5 pillars of Islam are profession of faith, prayer, alms, fasting, and pilgrimage. And so then we went from my first quilt, the little bitty one, to quilting with a group of women at the Hannibal Cultural Center in Winter Park. And there is a long arm quilting machine there. So I thought, hey, I got this. And I decided that I could go from that to creating this king size quilt here. So I made this, we were supposed to have a family reunion in Lake Mary, but it's been postponed now for like 3 years. And so you may not be able to see, but there are words that I stitched and the names of my brothers and sisters, my nieces, my nephews, Cuthbert, yeah. So the point was that some of the fabric is fabric that I tie-dyed. Some of it is batik that I batiqued or fabric that in my travels. The largest piece is like a shower curtain that I tie-dyed. And so in my house, you know, I have batik shower curtains that I've made and tie-dyed shower curtains that I've made. Batik projects that maybe didn't come out the way I thought, but in keeping with the Japanese principle of wabi-sabi, the art of imperfection. I never throw anything away, and I just incorporate it into a quilt. That shocking fuchsia pink was a skirt that I saw in a Goodwill store, and I loved it. And I was like, I'm gonna take it apart and incorporate it into a quilt, which with the fringe. And so the purple symbol, G-Niyami, is an Adinkra symbol. And you can Google Adinkra symbols, A-D-I-N-K-R-A. They are West African, and that particular symbol means God is omnipotent, and it's one of my favorite Adinkra symbols. So I incorporate a lot when I make quilts, because I'm really trying to communicate something about me, my heritage, my story. And we all have stories to tell, okay? And so I also have here some books which show some of the African motifs or patterns that I incorporate. And then I also bought a little photo thingamajiggy of some of the other artistic stuff that I've done, like silk scarves that I batiqued or tie-dyed, a wood table that I put Adinkra symbols on, masks that I've made. So all that to say, you know, we all have creativity in us, whether or not you believe that you do. We're all creative. And I'm just really fortunate that people that know me know, you know, if it's a choice between doing something creative or artistic or having, quote, an adventure versus mopping my floors or being domestic, I'm gonna opt for the creativity and having an adventure. So people, they say, well, you know, we don't come to visit your house. I'm like, thank God. You come to visit me, right? So, again, I thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. And do you have any questions or comments that you would like to make about anything that I've said?
Bravo.
Yes.
Did that other attorney, last name Bussy, ever get in touch with you?
H to the no.
Okay. And you said you do a lot of travel, you like to buy fabric. What was your favorite, maybe top 2 trips?
Okay, so, number 1 on the list, I would say probably the most spiritual place I've ever been. When I turned 60, I went to Bali. And Bali, words can't describe it. And in fact, I wrote an article for the Sentinel about my adventures in Bali. The first thing that I noticed was that you could be anywhere and you would find these banana leaf offerings, like on the sidewalk. On the tour bus every morning, on his dashboard, he would have a banana leaf, and there would be food on it, there would be flowers, and I was like, oh, gee. You know, imagine what it's like to be so connected to who you are and understanding the connection that you have to your ancestors, the people that came before you, who their journey made it possible for you to be here. And every day you honor them and you respect them. It's also interesting because, you know, in Bali you have, you know, Hinduism, and so where we stayed, there were all these magnificent Hindu deities like Ganesh and others, and I just went crazy with my camera taking photos. But also, I don't know if you all remember, a number of years ago, they had a mass shooting that happened in Bali. And so they have a magnificent memorial. It was at a nightclub, and that was literally down the street from where I was staying. And I made sure that I went to see that. So Bali ranks as being up there. And I guess my first trip, my first country, when I went to Africa, and that would have been Ghana. I was fortunate that at that time, Temple Law School had an exchange program with the University of Ghana Law School. I was able to be there for 6 weeks. I got to travel throughout the country of Ghana. I got to go to Togo and the capital, Lomé. And since that time, I've been to South Africa. I went there when I turned 50. When my niece got her bachelor's, we took her to Morocco. But I would say Ghana and certainly Bali. Any other questions or comments?